Barack Obama entered office with an aura of inevitability, the calm commander, the embodiment of generational change. The president Americans seemed almost relieved to hand their anxieties to after years of war and economic collapse. But underneath the surface, resentment simmered. Birtherism began as a whisper in the outer rings of political discourse, forwarded emails, fringe message boards, whispers among the chronically suspicious. But by 2009, it had grown into a movement, a weaponized expression of identity anxiety masquerading as procedural concern. Welcome to Chasing Power. I'm your host, Charles Denyer, and tonight we revisit the Barack Obama presidency that soared on the wings of optimism, drawing unprecedented faith from a country desperate for stability, only to discover that beneath the hope lay a gathering storm, a storm of political fury, cultural anxiety, and ideological revolt that would not only define the rest of his tenure, but ignite the most consequential backlash of the modern era.
We have picked ourselves up. We have fought our way back. And we know in our hearts that for the United States of America, the best is yet to come.
Yes, in fact, I was born in Hawaii, August 4th, 1961, in Kapi'olani Hospital.
Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world. The United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda. We may have different backgrounds, but we believe in the same dream that says this is a country where anything is possible, no matter who you are.
Welcome to Chasing Power, the path to Pennsylvania Avenue, a Charles Denyer Productions podcast.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
The audacity of hope. America, you've vindicated that hope.
And we will make America great again.
Power in America rarely announces itself in raw form. It expresses itself through symbols, systems, and the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. And when Barack Obama raised his right hand on that cold January day in 2009, becoming the nation's first black president, millions saw a symbol of transcendence, a moment when history bent, however briefly, toward progress. But beneath the soaring rhetoric, beneath the tidal wave of emotion, something far more formidable was taking shape. What the public witnessed was hope. What it did not see was the machine. Obama did not merely inherit this machine, he engineered it, refined it, and turned it into a weaponized form of political precision. His genius was not that he could inspire, though he could, it was that he could control. His calm exterior, his professorial cadence, the impression of effortlessness, none of it was accidental. It was the product of extraordinary discipline, message calibration, emotional choreography, and analytical rigor executed by the most sophisticated political operation the nation had ever seen. Around him stood an inner circle as tightly constructed as a command structure. David Axelrod, the strategist of narrative. David Plouffe, the surgeon of strategy. Valerie Jarrett, the unbreakable gatekeeper. Robert Gibbs, the measured voice of public defense. Inside this orbit, loyalty was demanded, dissent was contained, and every word, down to the pause between syllables, flowed upward for approval or downward for execution. But the true power of the Obama operation was technological, a transformation so immense that even political operatives didn't fully grasp it at the time. While Washington clung to landline polling, Obama's team built micro-targeting models that could identify not just who Americans were, but what they feared, what they desired, and what emotional triggers would resonate with them at precisely the right moment. Yet even the most powerful machines eventually crash into forces they cannot fully control. Fear, identity, resentment, and the ghosts of a country still wrestling with the contradictions between its ideals and its reality. And soon, the machine would collide with something far older than technology, the American obsession with legitimacy. Barack Obama entered office with an aura of inevitability, the calm commander, the embodiment of generational change. The president Americans seemed almost relieved to hand their anxieties to after years of war and economic collapse. But underneath the surface, resentment simmered. Birtherism began as a whisper in the outer rings of political discourse. Forwarded emails, fringe message boards, whispers among the chronically suspicious. But by 2009, it had grown into a movement, a weaponized expression of identity anxiety masquerading as procedural concern. The idea had less to do about Barack Obama possibly being born in Kenya and more to do with the assertion that he did not belong at the center of American power, that he was a foreigner to the mythology of American identity, that his presence in the Oval Office represented an intrusion, not an evolution. He was black, his father was from Kenya, and unfortunately, some people had a big problem with that. The potency of birtherism was more psychological and less factual. It offered its believers a way to explain their unease without confronting the new realities of America, a rapidly diversifying nation, shifting demographics, cultural reconfiguration, and the profound symbolic shift represented by a black family living in the White House. And then came Donald Trump, a man who understood intuitively the spectacle is never about truth, it's about provocation. He seized birtherism like a showman grabbing a spotlight, wielding it not as an argument, but as a performance. He questioned, he hinted, he teased, and he flung insinuations with a mastery of theatrical timing. Trump would very carefully say, "Hey, people are saying," a phrase engineered to absolve himself of responsibility while igniting the rumor. Obama initially dismissed it as noise, saying it was beneath the dignity of engagement. But the noise became a course, and the course became a force. Polls revealed that nearly a quarter of Americans doubted the president's birthplace. The White House could no longer ignore it. In April 2011, Obama released his long-form birth certificate, a bureaucratic document transformed into a cultural artifact. His remarks were calm, but edged with exhaustion.
We've had every official in Hawaii, Democrat and Republican, every news outlet that has investigated this, confirm that, yes, in fact, I was born in Hawaii, August 4th, 1961, in Kapiolani Hospital.
The message was clear. This topic is beneath a serious nation. But birtherism had never been about seriousness. It was about identity warfare. Then came the White House Correspondents Dinner in 2011, a night when Obama hit back. The president stood at the podium, poised and lethal, and roasted Donald Trump with precise surgical humor, dismantling his persona in front of Washington's power elite.
No one is happier, no one is prouder to put this birth certificate matter to rest than the Donald. And that's because he can finally get back to focusing on the issues that matter. Like, did we fake the moon landing?
The audience roared with laughter, while Trump fumed. What Obama and the country did not yet realize was that this moment passed through Trump like a shard of glass. It humiliated him, yes, but more importantly, it emboldened him, sending him on a trajectory of vengeance, fame, and political ambition that would catalyze the next decade. Obama ended the evening in triumph. Trump left in smoldering silence. Barack Obama was a man determined not to be undone by the flaws that consumed others. He had watched presidents crushed by the unpredictable tides of Washington's ego economy. So, he constructed a fortress, not of secrecy, though that did exist, but one of control. Inside the West Wing, he crafted an administration where leaks were treated as betrayal. Dissent was confined to private rooms, and every decision passed through a disciplined hierarchy. Emotion was regulated. Optics were curated. The presidency became less a public office than an operating system, sleek, secure, and optimized at all times. He hired technocrats, not showmen, analysts, not egotists, policy architects who believed in precision over drama. And while his supporters saw steadiness, critics saw aloofness, a president who floated above human messiness, too refined to descend into the trenches where political trust is forged. Obama almost governed like a cerebral engineer designing a bridge to withstand any storm. However, storms rarely behave according to blueprint. The illusion that Barack Obama's presidency marked the dawn of a post-racial America evaporated almost as quickly as it formed. The early breach came on July 16, 2009, with the arrest of Henry Louis Gates, a Harvard professor detained outside of his own home. When Obama addressed the incident, speaking with the candidness he rarely allowed himself, he remarked that the police had acted stupidly. What followed was not merely criticism, but a political eruption. Conservatives accused Obama of rushing to judgment, while police unions condemned him for undermining law enforcement. Overnight, the president, who had campaigned as a healer, was cast by critics as someone willing to inflame racial tensions and vilify the police. The infamous beer summit that ensued, a carefully staged gathering meant to cool tempers and signal unity, only underscored the depth of the wound. It was a symbolic gesture towards reconciliation, but it could not erase the fact that the country had already exposed a fracture far wider and more volatile than the moment had caused it. And then came the Trayvon Martin tragedy in early 2012. A teenager walking home in a hoodie, carrying candy and iced tea, was confronted and killed by George Zimmerman, a neighborhood watch volunteer. When Obama finally addressed the tragedy, he spoke with rare personal vulnerability.
But my main message is to the parents of Trayvon Martin. If I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon.
To many Black Americans, those words, to them, felt as if it was the first time a president's voice reflected their grief, fear, and daily reality. To his critics, it was more proof that Obama was racializing America, stoking the flames and creating an even higher degree of racial tension and divide between blacks and whites than ever before. Then came Ferguson, the fatal shooting of an unarmed black teenager, Michael Brown, by a white police officer on August 19, 2014. The event and the explosive decision not to indict the officer ignited nationwide protests, some peaceful, others violent, and propelled the Black Lives Matter movement from a hashtag into a defining force of American activism. For months, cities pulsed with anger, grief, and confrontation as the country entered one of the most intense national debates over race and policing in modern history. Obama found himself navigating a cultural divide he did not create but could not ignore, a divide that widened with every news cycle. Progressives demanded that he show sharper moral clarity. Conservatives accused him, once again, of fanning racial flames. Police unions charged him with undermining law enforcement. Civil rights activists insisted he wasn't doing nearly enough. Every statement he made seemed to disappoint one side and provoke the other. And just as the nation struggled to absorb Ferguson, a new horror emerged. In June 2015, a young white supremacist named Dylan Roof walked into a church in Charleston, South Carolina, sat through Bible study, and then opened fire.
Please answer. 911, what's the address of the emergency?
Please, Emmanuel Church is plenty people shot down here. Please send somebody right away.
Murdering 9 black parishioners in a massacre that stunned the nation. The attack was a stark reminder that America's deepest racial hatreds were not relics of the past, but active, pulsing threats of the present. Obama delivered one of the most emotionally resonant eulogies of his presidency, even breaking into Amazing Grace. Yet even this moment of catharsis underscored how far the country remained from the unity he once promised and imagined. Obama had vowed to usher in a more united America. Instead, he found himself presiding over the unraveling of illusions. A nation forced to confront traumas it had spent generations trying to bury. When Barack Obama embarked on his first international tour, he opened with a series of speeches.
We meet at a time of great tension between the United States and Muslims around the world,
steeped in humility, introspection, and a renewed call for global cooperation. In capitals across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, he acknowledged America's past missteps, spoke openly about historical overreach, and presented the United States not as a solitary enforcer, but as a nation willing to listen, adapt, and share responsibility. To supporters, this was statesmanship, a thoughtful reorientation of America's role in a turbulent world, a moment of moral clarity after years of confrontation. But to his critics,
more recently, tension has been fed by colonialism that denied rights and opportunities to many Muslims.
it was something far more alarming. They branded it the Apology Tour, a derisive label suggesting that Obama was not elevating America's standing, but rather diminishing it. They argued he was apologizing for American power, weakening the country's posture on the world stage, and sending a message of contrition at a time when adversaries respected only force. To them, his tone signaled vulnerability, not diplomacy, a retreat from American exceptionalism at precisely the moment the world demanded its assertion. Regardless, Obama believed he was resetting America's moral compass, reintroducing the nation as a stabilizing presence rather than a unilateral actor. Yet the global landscape he stepped into was far more volatile than the idealistic framework of his speeches. Reality, in all of its complexity and brutality, soon pressed against the narrative he sought to project, revealing the limits of even the most eloquent foreign policy vision. Yet, even as he reached out diplomatically, his administration expanded the drone program on an unprecedented scale. High-value targets were eliminated, but so were civilians, creating a moral paradox that began to erode the purity of his foreign policy image. Then came the Snowden revelations, exposing surveillance programs so vast they shocked even many of Obama's supporters. The president who had championed transparency now found himself defending secrecy. But the fractures that would come to define public perception of his foreign policy challenges emerged elsewhere. For starters, Guantanamo Bay remained open, a symbol of unfulfilled promises and the limits of presidential resolve. Obama had vowed to close it. Instead, it became a monument to political paralysis. Then, Syria descended into unimaginable horror as Obama's famous red line stance evaporated when chemical weapons were deployed and the world watched a humanitarian catastrophe unfold as the United States hesitated, recalibrated, and ultimately failed to influence the outcome. Then there was the Arab Spring. Once hailed as a regional awakening, it collapsed into fragmentation. Hopes for democratic transformation dissolved into civil wars, military coups, and authoritarian resurgence. To many, Obama seemed reactive, distant, even paralyzed by caution. And into that vacuum of instability rose the most damning symbol of his challenges: ISIS, a barbaric force erupting from the ruins of Iraq and Syria, seizing territory the size of nations, broadcasting beheadings, massacres, and terror across the globe. To his critics on the right, this was proof of weakness, a president who retreated when he should have projected force. To the critics on the left, it was proof of inconsistency, a leader who promised moral clarity, yet presided over moral chaos at times. To the American public, watching the Middle East burn while promises of restraint, diplomacy, and recalibration faded, these events merged into a narrative of drift, miscalculation, and unfulfilled rhetoric. Obama had sought to redefine America's role in the world, but for millions, the unfolding disasters abroad became the evidence, however unfair or oversimplified, that he had instead lost control of it. At home, Barack Obama pursued what would become one of the most ambitious and far-reaching domestic reforms since the Great Society, the Affordable Care Act, which quickly became known as Obamacare. It was not merely a piece of legislation, it was a philosophical reimagining of the American social contract, an assertion that healthcare was not a privilege rationed by luck and employment, but a right tethered to citizenship itself. Its passage required Herculean political effort, months of negotiations, pressure campaigns, and procedural acrobatics, with the administration navigating a minefield of opposition, misinformation, and internal dissent. Yet, against all odds, Obama and a Democratic Congress pushed it across the finish line. The result was earth-shattering. Millions gained coverage, insurers could no longer weaponize pre-existing conditions, and the healthcare landscape shifted in ways that would reverberate for generations. For Obama, it was the rare triumph that justified every sacrifice, every political scar. The policy he believed would outlive the chaos of Washington and forever mark his place in American history. For Obama, this wasn't just another policy victory, it was his crowning achievement. The accomplishment he would later describe as even surpassing the historic moment of becoming the nation's first black president. But triumph has a way of masking the storms gathering just beyond the horizon, doesn't it? And as soon as the ink dried, problems erupted.
there were major problems all over the country. Websites were slow or crashed altogether.
Healthcare.gov, the digital gateway to Obama's signature reform, collapsed under its own weight, crashing repeatedly and becoming a national punchline at precisely the moment Americans were trying to understand a law already shrouded in confusion. Premiums rose for some families, sparking anger, and Obama's repeated assurance, hey, if you like your plan, you can keep it, echoed back at him like an accusation, a soundbite transformed into a weapon. Before the Obama presidency became engulfed by wars over healthcare, race, and foreign policy, another conflict erupted. One that had nothing to do with ideology and everything to do with power, secrecy, and mistrust. It began with a gun-running operation gone very wrong and spiraled into a constitutional showdown that would shatter relations between the White House and Capitol Hill. The scandal was known as Operation Fast and Furious, an ambitious but deeply flawed ATF initiative intended to trace guns flowing into Mexican cartel networks. Instead, the weapons slipped into the criminal underworld, and 2 were later discovered at the scene of a murdered U.S. Border Patrol agent. At the center of the storm stood Attorney General Eric Holder, who was accused by congressional Republicans of stonewalling, misleading investigators, and concealing the extent of the Justice Department's knowledge. Holder insisted he had acted appropriately, but the political temperature kept rising. The Obama administration refused to release internal documents, invoking executive privilege, a move critics saw as proof of a cover-up. The House of Representatives ultimately would vote to hold Eric Holder in contempt of Congress, the first such vote against a sitting Attorney General in American history. But Fast and Furious did more than consume headlines. It poisoned the relationship between the executive branch and Congress for the remainder of Obama's presidency. Democrats saw the investigation as a partisan siege. Republicans viewed the administration's resistance as a dangerous refusal to be accountable. In many ways, this was the moment Washington broke. Years of simmering resentment toward Obama's agenda, economic stimulus, financial reform, environmental regulation, now converged into a single rallying point, his opposition. The fury coalesced into a new insurgent movement that called itself the Tea Party, a coalition of fiscal hawks, anti-government activists, cultural conservatives, and voters who felt alienated not only from Washington, but from the America they feared was slipping away. Fueled by talk radio, cable news, and the rising power of social media, the Tea Party became both a protest and a purge, reshaping the Republican Party into a more combative, obstructionist force for Barack Obama. And the 2010 midterm elections marked this very explosion. Democrats were pummeled with historic force.
And you see 19 state legislatures go to the other side, governorships in swing states, the Democratic Party set back. Mm-hmm. What does it feel like?
Feels bad.
Losing more than 60 seats in the House of Representatives, the largest midterm defeat in generations. Nancy Pelosi's speakership evaporated overnight, and John Boehner rose to power, pledging to halt Obama's agenda at every turn. The message from the electorate was unmistakable. The honeymoon was over. The hope-drenched coalition of 2008 had collided with the hard math of political backlash. And even with the killing of Osama bin Laden,
tonight, I can report to the American people,
the most definitive national security victory of Barack Obama's presidency, the political trajectory of his administration did not fundamentally change. And why? That's because, to a large degree, the midterm elections reshaped the rest of Obama's presidency, narrowing his legislative possibilities and hardening the partisan walls around him. Bin Laden's death offered a brief moment of unity, yet it could not overcome the deeper political forces already pulling Washington into years of confrontation and division. Up next, Part 3 on Barack Obama, Power, Paradox, and the America he left behind. Thanks for listening to Chasing Power, The Path to Pennsylvania Avenue. I'm your host, Charles Denyer.
Before we wrap up, don't miss out on Charles's 2 other powerhouse podcasts. Want weekly intel on the national security threats most never see? Threat Level Red delivers hard-hitting updates on rogue nations, global conflicts, cyber warfare, and more, all revealed with unflinching clarity. And for leaders navigating today's digital world, The Brief with Charles Denyer is your trusted guide to cybersecurity, compliance, risk, and AI. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Chasing Power, The Path to Pennsylvania Avenue is a Charles Denyer Productions podcast. All opinions expressed are those of the host and do not reflect the official positions of any political organization, government agency, or private institution. This podcast is for news reporting, commentary, and criticism. We use excerpts, clips, and quotations from political events and other copyrighted works under the Fair Use Doctrine. All rights in those works remain with their respective owners. The views expressed are our own and do not represent any other entity.